And that was it. And then he went outside with them till the cops came.
Did he describe what it looked like in there?
He said it was horrible.
He said it was horrible. Her face was all full of blood and bruised, banged up and whatnot. The place was a mess.
On a freezing Monday morning in December 1992, a man stood inside a quiet Pennsylvania home, shaking, pale, barely able to speak. All he kept saying was, "I know she's dead. I know she's dead." Moments later, he ran back outside, pounding on neighbors' doors, desperate for help. Inside that house lay a scene so violent, so disturbing, that it would haunt investigators and an entire community for more than 26 years. This was not supposed to happen here. Not to her. Not this close to Christmas. Christy Mirak was the kind of person every small town takes pride in. She was a 6th grade teacher, young, dedicated, and deeply loved by her students. The kind of teacher who arrived early, stayed late, and never missed a day without notice. In the hallways of Rohrerstown Elementary School, Christy was known for her warmth, her discipline, and her consistency. Which is why, on the morning of December 21st, 1992, something immediately felt wrong. Her classroom was empty. No coat on the chair, no lesson materials on the desk, no explanation. For Christy Mirak, being late wasn't just unusual, it was unthinkable. By 8 a.m., the school principal, Harry Goodman, began calling Christy's home. Once, twice, again, no answer. Each call went to voicemail. The unease grew quickly. Christy lived alone, she had no family nearby, and she had never failed to show up for work, not once. With a tightening feeling in his chest, Goodman made a decision that would change his life forever. He got in his car and drove to Christy's home. When he arrived, one detail immediately stood out. Christy's car was parked outside, its windows coated in thick, untouched ice. It hadn't been driven that morning. Then he saw the front door. It wasn't fully closed. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the house was silent, too silent. As Goodman stepped further in, his eyes adjusted, and what he saw would replay in his nightmares for years to come. The living room was in chaos. Signs of a violent struggle were everywhere. And on the floor lay Christy Mirak, beaten, strangled, partially undressed. She had been attacked with such brutality that investigators would later describe the scene as one of the most horrific they had ever encountered. 4 days before Christmas, a beloved teacher had been murdered in her own home. Within minutes, police flooded the neighborhood. Yellow tape wrapped around the condominium complex. Sirens echoed through streets usually filled only with morning routines. Parents clutched their children tighter. Doors locked earlier than usual. And a single question spread through the community like wildfire. Who could do something like this, and why? Over the next months, investigators would chase more than 60 suspects. They would conduct over 1,500 interviews. They would collect DNA, yet have no way to identify the man it belonged to. And while the case slowly froze in time, the killer did something far more terrifying. He stayed. He lived openly in the same community, smiling, trusted, even celebrated, hidden in plain sight.
Christy Mirak wasn't just a teacher. She was the spark of every room she entered, the kind of person who made friends feel like family and students feel like they could accomplish anything. Born in Shamokin, Pennsylvania, she grew up in a close-knit household as the middle of 3 children. Her family remembered her as stubborn yet endlessly kind, a girl with a fierce determination and a heart so generous it seemed to overflow. Her brother Vince would later describe her as someone who could light up an entire room with a smile and a joke, always looking for ways to lift the people around her. From a young age, Christy knew what she wanted to be, a teacher. When other kids played pretend in the living room, Christy played the role of the educator. She lined up her siblings as her students and approached the games with seriousness, foreshadowing the dedication she would bring to her classroom as an adult. By 1992, at just 25 years old, Christy had settled in Lancaster County. She loved her job at Rohrerstown Elementary School, a place where she could nurture her students' curiosity, guide their growth, and brighten their days. Colleagues described her as punctual, reliable, and endlessly caring. Students adored her, parents trusted her, and the community, though only beginning to know her, had already come to see Christy as someone special. Outside of work, Christy was quiet but independent. She valued her routines and her privacy, living life on her own terms. She had friends she trusted, and she took pleasure in simple joys, evenings at home, quiet walks, and the little traditions that made life meaningful. As December approached, Christy's days were filled with lessons, grading, and preparing for the holidays. But beneath the calm, ordinary life she led, danger was closer than anyone could imagine. The world she had built, a world of trust, safety, and routine, was about to be shattered in the most unimaginable way.
It was a cold December morning in 1992, just days before Christmas. The school was buzzing with students' excitement, teachers hurriedly wrapping up lessons, and the air thick with the anticipation of the holiday break. But for Christy Mirak's colleagues, the day began with a creeping sense of unease. When Christy failed to show up for her 6th grade class, it wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. Punctual to a fault, Christy never missed work without notice. Her principal, Harry Goodman, tried calling her home, only to be met with silence. Multiple calls went unanswered, messages left unreturned. Panic quietly began to build. With concern mounting, Harry contacted Christy's family. Her mother confirmed what he feared. Christy had no reason to be late. Acting quickly, he decided to check on her personally. Arriving at her condominium in East Lampeter Township, the first thing he noticed was her car, untouched, its windows glazed with morning frost. The front door stood slightly ajar. Stepping inside, a chilling stillness enveloped him. Then, the unthinkable. In the living room, Christy lay motionless on the carpet. Her body bore signs of brutal assault, deep contusions on her face, ligature marks on her neck, and clothing disheveled in a way that suggested a struggle. Her world, once so orderly and safe, had been violently torn apart. Harry, overcome with shock, ran to alert neighbors and call 911. Within minutes, the police arrived. The scene was horrific: blood, broken furniture, and evidence of a desperate struggle. Officers noted the positioning of Christy's body and the signs that she had likely been sexually assaulted before her death. Investigators quickly began door-to-door canvassing, searching for anyone who had seen or heard something unusual that morning. One neighbor recalled seeing a white car, a muscular man exiting and heading toward Christy's home around 7:15 a.m., just as her roommate left for work. Both women also reported hearing a scream, piercing and urgent, from the direction of her condominium. From the beginning, the timeline of the crime was chillingly precise. The killer had struck during the narrow window when Christy was alone, familiar with her routine, and unafraid to commit violence in bright daylight. As the scene was processed, forensic evidence was collected. Bodily fluids from the carpet, Christie's sweater and t-shirt, and other items that would later become central to solving the case. Yet despite these leads, no immediate suspect emerged. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. Friends, family, and colleagues struggled to comprehend the horror. For the Merak family, the realization was unbearable. Their beloved Christie had been taken in the most brutal way imaginable, and the person responsible was still out there, unknown, unseen, and undeterred. The investigation was about to enter a grueling phase. Dozens of suspects, hundreds of interviews, and years of dead ends. For over 20 years, the case would remain cold, a haunting reminder that evil could hide in plain sight.
In the immediate aftermath of Christie Merak's murder, Lancaster County's law enforcement mobilized with urgency. Detectives pored over every detail of the crime scene, meticulously documenting evidence and interviewing anyone who might have crossed paths with Christie in the days leading up to her death. Over the course of months, the investigation became all-consuming. More than 60 suspects were identified, ranging from acquaintances and co-workers to local residents who lived near Christie's home. Each lead was pursued with painstaking attention to detail, yet every trail seemed to dissolve into a dead end. Her boyfriend at the time, Daniel Daddario, became an early person of interest. The relationship had been secret, even from Christie's family, and ended just days before her death. Daniel provided an alibi and passed polygraph testing, and DNA evidence eliminated him as a suspect. Next, detectives scrutinized Christie's professional circle. Her principal, colleagues, and neighbors were questioned extensively. Everyone cooperated, and no evidence suggested involvement. Yet suspicions lingered. The killer could be someone the community knew and trusted, blending seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life. Meanwhile, the forensic evidence collected at the scene, the DNA from the carpet, clothing, and other items, yielded no immediate results. In 1992, DNA databases were in their infancy, limited to convicted offenders in only a few states. The profile collected from Christie's home belonged to a man who was completely unknown to law enforcement. Investigators revisited eyewitness accounts, including a neighbor who saw a white car parked near Christie's home that morning. The description, muscular man, dark hair, Dodge Daytona-style vehicle, provided a potential lead, but no match emerged. The killer's trail seemed to vanish into thin air. Years passed. Tips trickled in, promising hope but ultimately offering no resolution. Friends, family, and detectives endured frustration, heartbreak, and exhaustion. For Christie's mother, the pain was compounded by a battle with cancer, and she passed away in 2002 without knowing who had taken her daughter. Her dying wish to never stop seeking justice became the guiding mission for Christie's brother, Vince. Despite the incredible volume of interviews, over 1,500, and leads pursued, the case stalled, frozen in time. The DNA evidence, once a promising trail, sat untouched in storage as investigators grappled with the limitations of technology and the absence of a suspect. Through it all, one chilling truth became clear. The murderer was not a stranger who had fled the area. He had remained in the community, unseen and unsuspected, while Christie's life and the case itself hung in limbo. This stalemate would continue for more than 22 years, until advancements in forensic science and genetic genealogy would finally illuminate the dark truth that had eluded investigators for so long.
After more than 22 years, Christie Merak's case seemed frozen in time. The DNA collected at the crime scene remained unmatched, a silent record of the killer's presence, while the investigation struggled to adapt to new technology. That changed with the rise of genetic genealogy, a revolutionary method that had already helped solve high-profile cases like the Golden State Killer. In 2015, the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office took over the investigation, led by District Attorney Christine Wilson, who had followed the case since high school. She recognized that the forensic samples collected in 1992 were the key to finally identifying the killer. Two detectives from her office attended a law enforcement conference and learned about Parabon Nanolabs, a private lab specializing in DNA phenotyping. DNA phenotyping, or snapshot analysis, can predict a person's physical appearance from their genetic markers. The lab could estimate characteristics such as eye color, hair color, skin tone, facial structure, and ancestral background. While not perfect, these profiles provide investigators with a visual starting point that traditional DNA analysis cannot offer. The Parabon team analyzed Christie's DNA and produced composite images of the unknown suspect. To refine their search, they applied an aging algorithm, estimating what the killer might look like decades after the crime. This approach gave investigators their first glimpse of the man who had eluded law enforcement for 26 years. Simultaneously, investigators turned to genetic genealogy, uploading the DNA to public genealogy databases. While they didn't immediately identify the killer, they found distant relatives, which allowed genealogists to build family trees and trace connections. Over months of painstaking research, they narrowed their search to a specific family in Lancaster with a link to Puerto Rican ancestry. The breakthrough came when social media and local newspaper archives revealed a man in the community whose heritage matched the DNA prediction. He was known locally as a wedding and club performer, living openly in the town he had terrorized decades earlier. Finally, law enforcement obtained direct DNA from discarded items, including a water bottle and chewing gum, using an undercover officer. When compared to the crime scene DNA, the match was 100% conclusive. The nameless profile from 1992 finally had a name: Raymond Charles Rowe, a man who had lived in plain sight, building a career as a popular DJ, all while the case remained cold. This breakthrough marked a turning point in the investigation, proving that even decades-old cold cases could be solved with the right combination of innovation, persistence, and forensic science. For the Myrack family, it was the first glimmer of hope in 26 years, a chance for justice and long overdue closure. With the DNA match confirming Raymond Charles Rowe as the perpetrator, law enforcement moved quickly to secure an arrest. Rowe, who had lived in Lancaster openly for over 2 decades, was unaware that he had been identified. Investigators planned a careful operation to obtain direct DNA evidence without alerting him. On May 31, 2018, an undercover female officer attended one of Rowe's performances at a local elementary school. She engaged him in casual conversation while discreetly monitoring his movements. When Rowe distorted items, including a water bottle, a plastic cup, and a piece of used chewing gum, the officer collected them. Laboratory testing confirmed that the DNA from these items matched the crime scene profile 100%. Rowe was brought in for questioning. At first, he denied any contact with Christy Myrack or involvement in her death. However, as detectives confronted him with evidence, reports of a stalker, his vehicle at the time, and his proximity to Christy, he became defensive. Ultimately, the forensic evidence was overwhelming, leaving him no room to deny his actions.
On January 8, 2019, facing life imprisonment and additional decades of sentences, Rowe pleaded guilty to murder, sexual abuse, and burglary, avoiding the death penalty. The sentence handed down was life without parole, with an additional 60 to 120 years added for the other charges. Rowe offered no explanation for his motive, leaving the community and the Mirak family to grapple with the horror of his crime. Even after his conviction, Rowe attempted to challenge his sentence. In late 2021, he filed a post-conviction petition claiming innocence and alleging that he had been pressured into his plea while in poor physical and mental health. He requested new DNA testing on evidence from the scene. However, in April 2022, Lancaster County Judge Dennis Reinecker denied the petition, ruling that there was no reasonable possibility that new testing would prove his innocence, given the totality of the evidence. With Rowe incarcerated, the Mirak family finally received the justice and closure they had waited 26 years for. The arrest and conviction not only ended a long-standing nightmare, but also demonstrated the power of persistence, modern forensic science, and genetic genealogy in solving cold cases. The community, once haunted by uncertainty and fear, could now begin to heal, knowing that the truth, long buried, had finally been revealed.
The resolution of Christy Mirak's case brought both closure and reflection. After 26 years of uncertainty, the Mirak family finally had answers. While nothing could undo the pain of losing Christy, the conviction of Raymond Rowe allowed them to honor her memory and begin healing. For the Lancaster community, the arrest was a stark reminder that danger can hide in plain sight. Rowe had lived openly as a local celebrity, performing at weddings and nightclubs, and yet he had remained undetected for decades. The case reinforced the need for vigilance, community awareness, and the value of reporting suspicious behavior, even when nothing seems amiss at first glance. On a broader scale, Christie's case became a landmark example in forensic science and criminal investigation. The use of DNA phenotyping, genetic genealogy, and discarded DNA sampling showcased how cold cases could be solved even decades after the crime. Law enforcement agencies across the country took note, inspired to revisit other unresolved cases using these modern techniques. The story also highlighted the human cost of unsolved crimes. Christy's mother passed away, never knowing the identity of her daughter's killer, and her family endured decades of grief. Yet their persistence, combined with advances in science and investigative determination, proved critical in finally achieving justice. Finally, Christy Mirak's case serves as a lesson in patience, perseverance, and the power of innovation. It underscores that even the most daunting mysteries can be solved when families, investigators, and technology work together. The case left a lasting legacy, not only in Lancaster, but across the world of law enforcement and forensic science, reminding us that truth, no matter how long buried, can eventually be revealed.